One of my favorite commander decks of all time is my Chatterfang Squirrel General deck. I covered it on the channel a hot minute ago, and while it was a nutty little deck, I think I approached the idea of a Squirrel typo commander deck a little too seriously. There's a lot of fun things you can do in Commander, like building a deck that may or may not function, and so I threw caution to the wind and rebuilt Chatterfang entirely. I'd like to take you on a walk through this fun little brew I put together and show you just how unhinged this deck has become. Please don't leave. So to begin, I want to take a look at our commander, old Chatterfang. He's a 3/2 Squirrel Warrior for 2 and a green with Forest Walk. If you would create any number of tokens, you also create an equal quantity of 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens. You can play a black mana, sacrifice X squirrels, and target creature gets +X -X until the end of turn. So after looking at this and considering everything squirrels have ever stood for in the game of Magic the Gathering, I realized just how hilarious this card's design is. Alright, here's your little history lesson. In ye olde days, we used to have a creature called Emrakul, the Eon's Torn, who was a giant noodly 15/15 Eldrazi mommy who would come along and ruin your day. She was nigh unstoppable, but her biggest problem was she had one glaring weakness. Exactly 15 squirrels. Chatterfang, a refined and educated squirrel, understood and respected his history, and so he has learned the subtle art of taking down giant Eldrazi monstrosities. You can, in theory, sacrifice 15 squirrels to Chatterfang's ability to give Emrakul the Eon's Torn +15, -15 until the end of turn, which would, by a state-based action, kill the Eldrazi. Of course, Emrakul the Eon's Torn has been taken care of perhaps more effectively than any other entity in the multiverse by being locked in the moon on Innistrad, as well as being banned in the paper card game. But this ability works to our advantage, being able to use Chatterfang as removal, and this ties into some combo potential that we're going to discuss later on. But for now, let's start off by discussing our squirrel creatures. We run 12 squirrels in the deck. We're going to move our way up the curve and begin with our 1-drop friend, the Ravenous Squirrel. Since we are what sane and rational Magic players would call a token deck, we can use the Ravenous Squirrel's ability to sacrifice our X's tokens for card draw and life gain. As you'll see later on, this creature can actually grow even larger than Emrakul, and so it's definitely one of my favorites to have just sit on the battlefield menacingly, with not a thought behind those sweet squirrely eyes. The squirrel mob sounds like what I would call my squirrel-themed Sopranos reboot. HBO, I'm willing to sell you my scripts. I'll leave my phone number down in the description. Please call me, thank you. I'm from New Jersey, okay? We need all the help we can get to look good. But as you'll see from some of our squirrel creatures, many are largely used as generic beat sticks that just get big from having other squirrels in play. This deck does not take a lot of brain power to pilot, so you're more or less throwing squirrels at people and hoping that they do the job. Squirrel Sovereign feels more of a bear than a squirrel, but it's a lore that'll give my squirrels +1/+1, making it nice to have out when we begin making tokens, giving them a small little power buff. We also have classic cards like Chatter of the Squirrel and Acorn Harvest, which each give us a number of squirrel tokens. With Chatterfang in play, we'll actually get twice as many squirrel tokens from each of these. Chatterstorm is in here, and while we aren't technically a storm deck, it's a squirrel card, and it's always nice to play this at the end of a sequence of spells so we can get plenty more squirrely friends. Draykeeper, Deep Forest Hermit, and Deranged Hermit each give us some squirrels upon entering the battlefield. The latter two also serve as anthem effects for our squirrels, though they generally don't last on the battlefield for a lot of time. Nested Shambler is technically a zombie, but it can help make you a number of squirrels equal to its power once it dies. Pump it up to holy hell with Chatterfang, and you'll make twice the number of squirrels that you sacrificed. Trust me, it works. I asked Reddit. The Nut Collector makes us a squirrel at each of our upkeeps, and if we have 7 or more cards in our graveyard, our squirrels each get +2/+2. Realm Walker lets us play our squirrels from the top of our library, which, given how we are technically only running a small handful of squirrels, it might make this tricky. Toski is here as the original legendary squirrel. He just got demoted to being part of the 99 because his last performance review gave him poor marks on chewing things with his mouth full and caring little about squirrels. Toski has declined comment. Acorn Catapult is in here just to show how much pain I will endure for this meme of a deck. For 1 mana, we can ping a creature or player, moi, and then that player creates a squirrel. Now, a reasonable player might point this damage at an opponent, or more likely, they might not include this card in their deck at all, but I'm here for the meme. It makes a squirrel, and I will take an acorn to the face for the sake of my little baby. I was going to say nut, but I know how you interneters work. Chitterspitter is interestingly named. It lets us sacrifice a token to put an acorn counter onto the Chitterspitter. Squirrels then get +1/+1 for each acorn counter on the Chitterspitter. We can also pay a green and tap the Chitterspitter to create a squirrel. Okay, so Maskwood Nexus is in here to make everything into a squirrel. Literally, all of our creatures, both in play and not, are now squirrels. We can also pay 3 to make a 2/2 blue squirrel. Squirrel Sanctuary is in here to make a squirrel. And when a non-token creature dies, we can pay 1 to bounce the Sanctuary, technically letting us play it again to get another squirrel. It's just a shame that this can't trigger off of token creatures. Now, to answer the question that 4 of you have had, yes, we are actually using the Squirrel's Nest Earthcraft combo, which lets us enchant a land with the Squirrel's Nest, tap it for the token, use the token to untap the land using Earthcraft, and then you effectively can make infinite squirrel tokens. And if you have Chatterfang, you also will be making untapped squirrel tokens as well. We are also using the combo of Ivy Lane Denizen and Scurry Oak. Scurry Oak creates a squirrel token whenever it gets a +1/+1 counter put onto it, and then the Ivy Lane Denizen puts a +1/+1 counter onto a creature whenever another green creature enters the battlefield. If you have these two in play, we can get an arbitrarily large tree and an army of squirrels. We are also utilizing some other squirrels, if you could put air quotes over squirrels. We have Chameleon Colossus, a 4/4 squirrel with protection from black, who can double its power and toughness for 4 mana per instance. Game Trail Changeling is, in the slightly edited words of Graham Stark, a weird looking squirrel, but it does give us a 4/4 squirrel with trample. Frozen Beast is another creature that is apparently a squirrel. I don't see it, but hey, a potential 8/8 squirrel for 4 mana is nothing to scoff at. Masked Vandal is a 1/3 squirrel whose hobbies include leaving googly eyes on inanimate objects, but it also allows us to exile a creature from our graveyard to exile a target artifact or enchantment that an opponent controls. Metallic Mimic is a bit of a gaudy squirrel, but it allows our other squirrels to enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on them. I'm not entirely sure squirrels know how to count to make those counters relevant. Next time you see a squirrel, ask them, and then we'll reconvene here to compile our answers. So if you can't tell by now, I actually lied about going up the mana curve thing because I lost track of how to count, and I looked at our 2-drop squirrels and I realized I'd be ruining the surprise prematurely. But we also have Xeno Squirrels, who look like they just want a snack or a hug. Maybe both. I'll serve as both. But yes, this squirrel lets us trade one of its 2 +1/+1 counters on the Xeno Squirrel to either increase or decrease a dice roll by 1. And so, this organic segue I didn't intend to get into this early brings us to our secondary strategy, attractions. We are using the attractions mechanic from Unfinity, literally because I found I had a copy of Squirrel Squatters, it was a squirrel, I wanted it in this deck, and here its home is now. Attractions are an artifact subtype that actually do not go into your main deck, but exist in a secondary deck of at least 10 cards, singleton, called your attraction deck. When something like the Squirrel Squatters will open an attraction, we put the top card of our attraction deck onto the battlefield. We'll get into which attractions we've included in a bit, but the way that these cards work is, during your pre-combat main phase, you may roll a d6 and then visit any of the attractions that have the result that you rolled as a lit up lamp on the right side of the card. Each card always will have the 6 result lit up, and no card will ever have the 1 result lit up. So these two are the critical success and critical failure results respectively. Since the visit triggers use the stack, when you roll and land on successful visit results, you choose how they go on the stack and will resolve. We do have a number of cards that care about attractions. Deadbeat Attendant lets us open an attraction upon it entering the battlefield. It's a pretty basic ability, but we want our squirrels to have fun at their discount Disney World, so we need to open some attractions. Discourtesy Clerk does the same thing, opening an attraction on ETB, but at the beginning of our end step, should we have 3 or more attractions, we draw a card and lose 1 life. It's card draw, baby! Quick Fixer is a 2/3 with Menace, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we open an attraction. Spinneret Arachnobat is a 2/4 Spider Performer who also has an ETB open an attraction thingy. And if we control 3 or more attractions, it gets +2/+0 and Menachi. We also have the Most Dangerous Gamer, who could be the commander of their own deck, but I felt that this represented me in the deck. A gamer nerd with an unhealthy obsession over games, and a weird fanaticism over small furry rodents. Whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, we open an attraction. Whenever we open an attraction, we put a +1/+1 counter onto the gamer. and whenever we claim the prize of an attraction, we can destroy target permanent. We'll get into our attractions later on, but this is one of the key cards to get our theme park a-rollin'. Coming attractions fetches us a basic and opens an attraction. Step Right Up opens 2 attractions. Mirrorworks and Sculpting Steel are both in the deck to give us additional copies of whichever attractions we find the most value out of. Since they too are singleton, we only get 1 copy per deck. I want extra attractions with the same abilities, so we'll make copies to get us additional value. Night Shift of the Living Dead is the perfect tech for this card. Since we're going to want to roll specific numbers, this is a great way to change the result in the same vein as the Xeno Squirrels. If we luck out and manage to make it a 6, we also get a Zombie Employee Creature token. So there's that. So, back to the squirrel bit for a moment. I was a little preoccupied and distracted by the pretty lights of the attraction stuff that I completely forgot that we have some important squirrel tech in this deck. See, these are token creatures and are very quick to be disposed of, so to that we have some valuable cards that will break these tokens like an acorn between incisors. Perhaps the most powerful is the Pitiless Plunderer. You've all known this card. It makes a treasure token whenever a creature we control dies. If Chatterfang is out, not only do we get that treasure token, but we get a squirrel token too. This can then be used to pay for Chatterfang's ability, repeat the cycle, but giving an opponent's creature +1/-1, and then we can theoretically repeat this until all of the creatures that we need to kill are dead. We can also call upon Blood Artist in this combo to kill the table off entirely with the nearly infinite death triggers. Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, also gives our tokens the ability to tap for 1 green mana, teaching all of our squirrels the secret art of the Elvish Mystic. Nadier's Nightblade is phenomenal in the aforementioned combo, as those tokens leaving the battlefield will also ping the whole table and gain us 1 life. It's another way to kill our opponents. Blasting Station is in a sense a win con in this situation, letting us sacrifice our squirrel tokens to ping an opponent. We can then make a treasure and a squirrel with the Chatterfang and the Plunderer combo. The squirrel then untaps the Blasting Station and then we repeat. Think of it as a killing the opponents with an unrelenting flurry of squirrels kind of deal. We also run Beastmaster Ascension. In the event that all of these other antics don't quite kill the table, we can simply swing out with our giant army of Squirrelzillas. Finally, Throne of the God Pharaoh synergizes very nicely with the Earthcraft combo, as all of those tapped squirrels that we use to create more squirrels will end up burning the table for an infinite amount of damage. Now, the moment you've been waiting for. We're going to get into the attraction cards. I'm not going to go through each and every one of their abilities, though you are free to use whichever ones you want. The only concession with this is that I chose to run Squirrel Stack and Push Your Luck, both of which have the acorn symbol, which means that it's technically not a legal card for commander usage. But shout out to House Rules and Rule Zero for giving me the possibility to run these with a permitting playgroup. The deck still would work without them, but most of the time I will try to get these playable. Now for you folks watching the YouTube video and not just listening to it, you are more than welcome to read the actual card abilities. I will still put the cards up on the screen as I always do. I just found some of the humor in Unfinity to be hilarious and I love it, and so to give some recognition to whoever was in charge of it, instead of reading the card abilities, I'm going to be reading some of the flavor texts from some of the attractions. Because that would totally make sense in this video, right? Input accepted, Shivan Dragon initiating, error, giraffe, giraffe, giraffe. It's a raucous, ricochet-ridden romp loosely based on the molecular movement inside of exploding stars. The sound it makes is indescribable and unsettling, but it does make a great clown. Eating here is always a concession. Technically you can't jump in space. What are you? After a certain point, it becomes more of a prison than a ride. I'm sorry, ma'am, sometimes a real sword, it just sneaks its way in there. Today's fortune, to avoid certain doom, make sure to insert additional tokens to continue. Finally, something that can capture all of my good angles. Putting the ooh in spooky and the fun in no refunds. Sir, this may be the information booth, but I cannot answer ontological questions. It would be arrogant to assume that I could describe the true nature of reality. Also, there's a line. The calming motion of this grubling's ride reminds me of my world's beauty before this mobile astropark obliterated it. Ensconced in a slow, timed bubble that makes a 5-minute ride take 9 hours, this carousel is a very popular childcare option. The howling mine moves faster than the speed of sound. The screams you hear? Another group ahead of you. The ship spinning out of control was spot on, but knowing shouting, "Nebula, you fell asleep again," or openly weeping? Too unrealistic. The ride is whimsical and fun, except when it's broken. A good ride should always feel like something has gone terribly wrong. I had to wrestle a squirrel for it, but I won. Yes, my gobbo friend, you won. Which is what you'll do if you decide to run Chatterfang Squirrel General as your commander deck. I think this is an amazing commander deck for fun and goofy gameplay, and to be honest, I've really grown to love the attraction cards. I totally overlooked them when they were first released, but they're fun, they're goofy, they vaguely reminded me of Futurama, I don't know why, but I think that they add a great element to any commander game. But for now, that's going to wrap up this look at my Chatterfang deck. What sort of funny decks do you like to run? Let's talk about them in the comments section below. Question: what do you think is the cutest squirrel token? Leave your answer in the comments below, and I'll be sure to let that squirrel token know you voted for them. If you're new here and enjoy the cringe, feel free to subscribe so you never miss a new video. Likes and comments are amazing for my mental health, and as always, I'll see you folks in the next video. Squirrel Man, away! This really was the stupidest video I have ever put together, but I love it so.